In this video, we're going to continue our factoring techniques that we started in the last video, Factoring Trinomials 1. And if you recall, in Factoring Trinomials 1, we were factoring trinomials where the x squared term had a coefficient of 1. So, for example, we might factor something like this, 5x squared plus 5x plus 6. And we used a technique called trial and error in the last video. So we had our two parentheses for our binomials, and here are two monomials that multiply to x squared, which would be x and x. And then because this first coefficient is at 1, in order to get these two terms, we looked to find two numbers that multiply to positive 6 and add it to a positive 5. And so that would be 2 and 3. And so then remember that we checked by using our FOIL method. And so we went first, x times x, which is x squared, outer, x times 3, which is plus 3x, inner, 2 times x, which is plus 2x, and last, 2 times 3, which is 6. And then adding these two middle terms, which are the like terms, we ended up with the trinomial we started. So that's what we did in the last video. In this video, you can see by our first example here, our leading coefficient, or our coefficient of x squared, is not 1. It's a number other than 1. So we are going to use our trial and error method, but this 3 is going to impact how we get our middle term. So again, here and here, we need two monomials that multiply to 3x squared. And if you thought 3x times x, you're right, because 3 times 1 is the only way that we can get a 3, and x times x for our x squared. Okay, now we are going to, here and here, we need two numbers that multiply to positive 4, but we're going to have to check to make sure that we get the correct middle term when we do this factoring. So 4, as you know, factors as 2 times 2, and it also factors as 4 times 1. So we're going to use a bit of trial and error here to see which of these two combinations give us the 13. So I think most students might start with 2 times 2. So we would have plus 2 here and plus 2. That would give us our positive 4, but now we have to check to make sure we get the middle term. And the 13, the middle term, we get by multiplying inners and multiplying outers and then adding them to get the middle term. So inners, we get 2 times x, and that's a 2x. And in the outers, we get 3x times 2, which is a 6x. So notice that when we add these together, we get an 8x, which is not the middle term that we want, because we want a 13. So that tells us that we have to try something else here for 2 and 2. And so we're going to now try the 4 and 1. So let's do that. Let's get our eraser. Okay. All right. And so now we're going to try 4 and 1. Okay, so again, you want to check your middle term, and so in the inners we get 4x, and in the outers we get 3x, and that adds it up to 7x. Okay, well that's still not our 13, but before you get frustrated, we do have to try one more combination, and that is what happens if we change the 4 and the 1. So we're going to change that, because that is going to affect our middle term, isn't it, if we change the position of 4 and 1. So again, our inners is 1x, and our outers is 3x times 4, which is 12x. And guess what? There's our 13x. So that checks. So you notice how we did the trial and error method to factor this trinomial. And we looked at both ways that we could factor the 4. We tried different combinations here of factors of 4. But we always had to check the inners and the outers to make sure we have the right middle term. That's really important. Okay, let's go to the next one. Next example. All right, again, here are parentheses. 2x squared. Well, that gets factored as 2x and x. Okay, that's good. And then here we have a 15. And again, we have that 13 middle term. That's a coincidence. But so how do we factor 15? Well, we have 15 and 1, and we have 5 and 3. Okay, well, 15 and 1 seems a bit big here with to try to get that 13, right, out of 15. So let's play with the 5 and the 3. And it's going to be real important that we put them in the right order, right? So if we put the plus 5 here and the plus 3 here, let's check our middle terms. Inners and outers, and so that's a 5x. And 2x times 3, which is 6x. Okay, that's going to give us 11, so that's not 13. So we are going to switch the order of these two. And let's put the 3 here and the 5 here. That still gives us 15 for the last term. And in the middle, we get inners give us 3x, the outers give us 10x, and there's our 13x. So remember, check your middle term. Okay, let's try another one. 4t squared plus 5t plus 1. Okay, I see some good news here, don't you? We can only factor 1 as 1 and 1, so we know that's fixed. Okay, and this is positive, so the middle term's positive, so we get 2 positives here. We do factor 4 two different ways, don't we? We can factor it again as 2 times 2 or as 4 times 1. And maybe you're getting, I'm kind of seeing this 4 times 1 with those 1s might give us that 5, don't you think? So let's try that 4t and 1t here. And again, let's check that middle term. And so here we get t, and times here we get 4t, and there's our 5t, so that checks. Okay. Here's another one. 9x squared plus 3x minus 20. Okay, this one's a little bit more complicated because 9 factors 2 ways, 1 and 9, and 3 and 3, right? And the 20 factors several ways, doesn't it? Well, we have 20 and 1, we have 2 and 10, we have 4 and 5. So we're going to have, there's potential here for several combinations to try to get that 3x. Also notice that it's a negative 20, which means right away that we're going to have one of each sign, a positive and a negative. Okay, well, trial and error, you just kind of use your instinct or your feel for numbers and see, well, do we want to try the 9 and 1 first or the 3 and 3? And I think most people will try the 3 and 3 first. So let's start there, the 3x and 3x. Okay, now the other thing I want you to notice is our middle term is kind of small. So we're going to want some numbers that are kind of close together, don't you think, to get that 3? So shall we try the 4 and the 5? That's kind of where I would go. So let's do 4 and 5. And again, since our middle term is positive, we're going to want, the bigger product to be positive. Now, don't worry too much of that because we can always change the signs later. So let's try the 5 here and the 4 there. And we are going to check our middle term. So 5 times 3 is 15x. And 3x times a negative 4 is a negative 12x. And a positive 15x minus 12x equals 3x. And what do you know? We got it on the first try. But remember, you may have done several combinations before you got to this. Okay, but kind of use your feel for numbers and it'll serve you well. Okay, we've got another one here. This one, 24x squared plus 12x plus 15. Okay, let's talk about GCF. And that is that, do you notice that all 3 of these terms are in the 3's table? So they have a 3, a common factor of 3, don't they? So you want to take out the GCF first before you start doing your trial and error. So factor out the GCF. By the way, that stands for greatest common factor first. So the greatest common factor here is 3, so we're going to take out a 3. And that's going to leave us with 8x squared plus 4x plus 5. And this trinomial is the one that we're going to do the trial and error. The 3 just kind of hangs on. So it tags along. Okay? All right. Well, good news is that 5 only factors one way, 5 and 1. So we don't have too many choices there. But 8 factors two ways, doesn't it? 8 factors as 8 and 1 or 2 and 4. And then 5 is 5 and 1, right? So, okay, what's your feel? What do you think? We have a 4. What are we thinking? Shall we try the I think most people would try the 2 and the 4 first. So let's try a 2x and a 4x. And our signs are both going to be positives. And then we got to place that 5 and 1 strategically. So how about, well, if we put the 5 here, 5 times 4 is going to give us 20. So that's going to be too big. So let's put the 5 here and the 1 here and see what that does. Okay, inners and outers. So here we get a 4x, and there we get a 10x. Uh-oh, too big. That's too big. So what does that tell us? Well, I think we're going to have to try that 8 and that 1. Okay, all right, so let's try that 8 and that 1. Okay, so 8 and 1. And now we get 8x, and we get 5x. Okay, so we're trying to get that 4, so not good. Not looking good, because that's going to give us 13. And if we move this around, if we put the 8 over here and the 1 here, then now we're going to get an even bigger number, aren't we? Going to get 1x, and we're going to get 40. So, what does that tell us? Well, don't know about you, but it tells me that this trinomial is prime. And so the only factoring that we could do is to take out the 3. So our final answer will be 3 times x squared plus 4x plus 5. Okay, let's try one more. Okay, I'm looking at this. Do you see the GCF? The greatest common factor? Greatest common factor is 3x. So there's even an x. They all have an x in common. So let's take out the 3x. That leaves here an x squared minus 6x minus 9. And now we're going to do our trial and error. And 9, this one's good because 3 and 3. And can you see the 6? Since our coefficient here is 1. Oh, we're in trouble. Do you see why we're in trouble? Because I need a plus and a minus. I need one of each. And 3 and 3 is going to give me positive 3 minus 3x gives me 0. So that's not good. And the only other thing we can try is 9 and 1. And 9 and 1 is going to give us 8, isn't it? So guess what? We are stuck. And that means that our final factoring for this problem is just taking out the 3x and leaving the trinomial.